All right. Hi, everyone. I see that a few people are starting to join us. Let me, it's great to have you all here. Where are you all joining from? The people who are just coming in, let us know. All right, Daniel from Berlin. I know you, Daniel. Hey, Audi, how's it going? Where are you coming in from? Wow, Dubai. Awesome, awesome. Welcome. Yeah, how hot is it over there today? Chicago. That's awesome. Wow, 38 degrees. That is scorching. And we're gonna just hang out here for a few minutes. We're gonna, probably wait till a few minutes past the hour, and then we'll get started. So just hang in there. Alex, welcome, welcome. And we have a lot to go through today. We're really excited to share, just to talk about this topic, to have this a conversation with our amazing panelists. I think, I'm personally somebody who really cares about this topic. I think it's just a topic that doesn't get as much traction or as much attention as I personally think it should. So I really enjoy having this time for us to do a little bit of a deep dive into it, because it is really a crucial topic for anyone who's trying to use Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general to build a business, and not just get one batch of a product out into the world. And as we wait here, I wanted to give a shout out to Daniel, who you saw earlier, commenting in the comments in the chat. Daniel is the co-founder of Launch Studio. So me and Daniel started Launch Studio together almost a year and a half ago. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Alex, who is one of our community members in Launch Studio. I know that we'll have a few of our other students joining in too in the next little while. But always great to see members of our community attend our public events. Cool. I'm actually gonna just start going through the material, and just as an overview thing, I'm going to be focused for the next little bit, on slides, and we'll have a conversation. We are going to have a Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, you can drop them in to the chat. But I think what's the best place to drop the questions in would be to the Q&A, and you can access the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom window. There is a Q&A button. That is the best place, just because those Q&A questions then are all kind of centralized in one place versus us having to go and search for questions through the chat. So just a small request that I have there. So I'm going to switch over to the slide here. Just give me one sec. Awesome. So a little bit about me. Really thrilled to be here today. My name is Giulio Terra. As of course you've already realized, I'm one of the co-founders of Launch Studio. I'm going to be your captain here today. I'm going to be both kind of taking you through this initial set of slides, and then I'm going to be leading the panel conversation later. A little bit about my background. Before starting Launch Studio, I used to work at Kickstarter. I ran the design and technology team over there that was responsible for engaging with creators in the design and technology world, getting them to come onto the platform and launch their products on Kickstarter, and also finding ways to help them succeed, not only on Kickstarter, but hopefully succeed in the long term. So, hopefully you're here today to learn about backers and why they're so valuable. If you are, you're in the right place. So the way that we're gonna spend this next 90 minutes together is I'm gonna start by making the case for why backers are so valuable, and and why they're so important, specifically for creators that are launching products on Kickstarter. Then afterwards, I'm going to host a conversation with 3 really experienced creators who have launched multiple projects, just to hear from them, how backers have had a role in their company's trajectory. My goal is that at the end of this 90-minute session, you're going to have a deeper appreciation for why backers matter. And you're also going to learn about some attitudes, strategies, tactics, and tools that can help you tap into this powerful asset. So before we get started, I'm gonna just launch a little poll. I just wanna understand, like, why are you here today? If you could let me know, do you have an idea that you are hoping to crowdfund in the future? Are you actively working on a product that you wanna launch? Do you have a campaign that's live right now? Do you provide services to people who run campaigns? Or are you just curious about this topic? It's always really great to understand a little bit about the audience, as we dive into the topic. Cool. I'm gonna leave that going for a little bit. I see that just a few of you answered. Just the ones that have answered so far, it seems like most people are actively working on a product that they want to launch. But we'll see what else we learn there. So now I'm going to take you. I gave you a very broad strokes that we're going to go through today. This is how it's going to break down. The next 10 minutes is I'll be focused on just making that case for why backers matter. Then we're going to spend a good 45, 50 minutes in a panel conversation with our three awesome panelists, and they'll introduce themselves at greater length later. But I'm really, really happy to just quickly mention who they are. We have Lynnette, Kelley, who is one of the co-owners of Calamity Worldwide, and she's also the business manager over there. They make just really, really awesome products. We were just talking about how they've cornered the market on little monsters. They just make these beautiful products, everything from dinnerware to blankets, with the designs of Don Moyer, who is an illustrator that makes just really awesome work. Then we have Erik Thorstensson, who is the founder of Strawbees. Strawbees is a company that lets you create these really amazing mechanical structures using straws and these little connectors. And they've just done a really amazing work to build this just ecosystem of building blocks for kids and adults and anyone who wants to play with building mechanical structures easily. Then we have also Ted Burdett, who is from Strand Design. And Ted has, makes, his background is as a designer in academia as well. But over the last, 7-8 years, he's launched a bunch of different products around cooking and using like baking. I personally have one of his Forno ovens, which is this really awesome product to help you bake sourdough breads, or at least I use it for sourdough breads. I guess you can use it for any kind of breads. But he's really tapped into tools for the home baker and home cook to level up their game in the kitchen. And so just really quickly, this event here at the very end, we're going to have a live Q&A where you'll be able to ask questions to me and all of our panelists. And this event is part of the Creator and Launch Studio series. And this is a series of webinars that we're organizing that brings together creators with experience launching products on Kickstarter to really explore, and learn from their experience and their expertise. And here are just some quick tips to help you get the most from our time together. First off, just reduce distractions as much as possible. Stay until the end. We're going to cover a lot of material, and that you never know when there will be that nugget of wisdom that might really have an impact on what you're doing. Be an active participant. As you see, I'm going to be, putting up some polls along the way. I'm also going to be asking questions and ask you to answer things in the comments or share some things in the comment. Be an active participant. That's really how you're going to get the most out of this. And of course, at the end, we have the Q&A. So if you have questions, this is really an awesome opportunity for you to ask those questions. And so again, I'm going to wrap up the other poll. And so it seems like pretty much most of the people here are actively working on a product that they want to launch. So that's great. That's, I think, consistent with many of the other polls that we've run in our other workshops. So the other poll that I'm going to just quickly launch here, give me 1 second, is how familiar are you with Kickstarter? Have you never backed a project? Have you backed a couple of projects? Have you backed a large number of projects? Are you addicted like me and back projects all the time? Or maybe you've actually launched a project or even two. So let us know your level of familiarity with the platform. And again, I'll leave that running and I'll continue, going through the slides, and I'll check in on this in a little bit. So why do backers matter? The funds that you're going to raise on Kickstarter are really valuable. I mean, that's why what people think first and foremost when they think about Kickstarter. But most of these funds are going to get used up pretty quickly, because most of these funds you're going to use to manufacture and fulfill your product. This is a quote from Ben Einstein. He used to be, he was one of the founders of Bolt, which is a hardware accelerator. And he said in this article that he wrote, every dollar you raise in crowdfunding must be repaid with product. And I think this is really crucial, because this gets to the point that like the money you're raising on Kickstarter is not capital that you raise via other means that you can just use to invest to grow your business. It's actually money that you need to spend to produce product, because you owe that product to those people who have given you that money. So in many ways, Kickstarter, the money you raise on Kickstarter is like a loan that you need to pay back with product. And again, if you plan things out really well, if you really understand your costs and you really understand your margin, of course you can still, have some money left over after you manufacture and produce your product, manufacture and fulfill your product, to be able to, either claim that money as profit or also just invest it back in your business. But the vast majority of that money that you raise will be spent, just manufacturing and fulfilling your product. On the other hand, I think one piece of value that people don't often think about is the value that you can actually nurture from a backer community. If you have a community of backers that can become loyal and continue and keep them excited about your product, that can actually have a real long-term impact on your project, an impact that lasts for many years as opposed to many months. So I think that's, having backers that are, that are transformed into your advocates can have an impact that lasts much longer than that money will last, for your company and for your project. So, satisfied customers are actually a pretty accepted indicator of a company's health. When you look at large corporations and even just more established businesses, they are often measuring the value of loyalty and advocacy using, two different very common methods. One of them is called the Net Promoter Score. And the Net Promoter Score is essentially an indicator of future performance that is developed by measuring the likelihood that your customers are going to recommend your product to others. And if your customers are very likely to recommend your product to others, are you able to have a high Net Promoter Score? And this is, again, widely accepted as a really, really strong measure of a company's future prospects. The other way that companies measure, the long-term value of a customer is this thing called customer lifetime value. And this is a methodology that usually companies that are data heavy, that have a lot of data about their customers, that's where this was born, where they, essentially create data models that project out all the revenue that they can earn from customers that they have. And so this is a way, so these are just two ways just to show that the notion that, your customers, or in our case, your backers, are really this amazing source, this amazing asset, this amazing source of long-term value, is something that is widely accepted. And I think it's something that's talked about often in larger, more established companies. But I think in the world of crowdfunding, it's often something that's not really paid attention to. One question that I often get when I'm talking to independent designers or entrepreneurs about the importance of backer satisfaction is I get that backer it goes off something like this. I get that having happy backers is a good thing, but doesn't that ultimately just boil down to whether or not I deliver a good product? And the answer to that question is no. Actually, how backers feel about your product is influenced by the entire experience that they have with your team. And that extends way beyond their interactions with your product. So, of course, the product that you deliver is a super important factor in making your backers happy. If you give your backers the best backer experience, but you give them a subpar product, or a product that doesn't deliver on its promises, they're not going to be happy. But, the interactions that you have with your backers can really, create a strong connection between your company, your brand, and your backers. And that can actually, nurture, as you'll hear from our panelists, can nurture a much deeper connection than your product ever could on its own. And it can even, impact the way that those backers perceive your product when they get. And let's, rather than talk about this abstractly, let's actually drill down into two concrete examples of this. So, when Peak Design, started to fulfill rewards for their fourth campaign, it was a campaign called Slide and Clutch. They became aware of a serious issue with the first batch of products that they had already produced and shipped. So this was about 6 weeks or so. So this was a campaign in 2014, and so about 6 weeks or so after they completed the campaign, they actually started shipping very early. And what they found out is that one of the products that they had launched were these anchors that enable people to attach their cameras to their camera straps. Unfortunately, some of these anchors were failing. And so for a company that creates products to carry cameras, having a product that failed to actually carry cameras was a completely life-threatening issue that they had to resolve. And what they did is, so they identified the issue again about a month after the campaign had wrapped up, like really shortly after they started shipping their first batch. And then it took them about 5 weeks. They worked diligently to find a solution. It took them about 5 weeks to find a solution. It took them about a week after that to ship a kit that solved that problem. And during that 8-week period from when they were, or not 8, during that 5-week period from when they found the product problem to when they solved the problem and had shipped out a solution, they were actually posting to their community, multiple times a week. They actually sent their community 8 updates during that period. And this situation that happened, that could have literally been the downfall of their company, ended up becoming an opportunity where their company, their backers were able to see how committed the Peak Design team was at delivering on their promise of creating the best products for carrying cameras. And it ultimately ended up being an opportunity for them to forge much deeper relationships with backers of that campaign. And having talked to the team of Peak Design, I mean, they always say how this became a moment where people who had started becoming detractors when they saw the issue became some of their biggest fans when they witnessed how they were able to resolve this really crucial mission critical issue. The opposite applies here too, though. And this kind of the importance of the way you engage with a company applies way beyond crowdfunding. So just now let's look at the negative impact of bad customer interactions. And I'm going to actually look at an example, personal example, that is outside of crowdfunding, but just again to highlight the importance of your interaction with your backers beyond the product. So on December 6th of last year, I ordered a humidifier from this company called Calamity. And it's this really kind of a fancy humidifier. And we have a young daughter, and we're like, we need a way to keep her room a little bit more humid in the winter. So I made the order on the 6th of December. It's supposed to ship out within a week or so. On the 20th of December, my order hadn't shipped out yet. So I follow up with them. They informed me that my order is going to ship that week and that I would get my tracking order any day now. Don't hear anything until January 7th. On January 7th, I reach out to them to reach out again. This time they inform me that they don't know what happened. They need to check with their warehouse to see what's going on, and they're going to get back to me right away. Don't hear back to them until January 13th when I reach out to them again. This time they inform me that they're still trying to track down my order with the warehouse, and that they promised me that it's going to get shipped out that very week. Of course, I think you can guess what happens next. By January 20th, my order hadn't been shipped out yet. I finally get in touch with them. At this point, I'm livid. I cancel my order. And, beyond this little schedule of events of what happened, this is a company that I will never interact with again, no matter how good their product is, no matter how well recommended it comes from people that I know. My experience with that company means that I will never, ever be willing to engage with them again in any similar way. So I'd love to hear, what about everyone here who's joining us today? Have you had any experiences, good and bad, with companies? What is an example of a company that has either delighted you or that has given you an experience that has been so disappointing that you would never engage with them again. And just really quick, going back to the poll, it seems like we have a really wide variety in terms of experiences with Kickstarter here. We have, a handful of people that have never backed a project, a handful of people that have backed a couple of projects. I think I'm the only addict here for Kickstarter for backing Kickstarter projects. And we actually do have a few people who have also launched projects in the past. Okay, great. Does anyone have anything to share there? I'm going to just continue on to the next section. So the last section here is I just want to really touch on the fact that backers differ from customers in many different ways, but there's two specific significant ways that I wanted to touch on. One is that your engagement with backers is much longer lived, because with most customers, they order a product, they get that product within a few days. When it comes to your backers, you order, they pledge to your project, and they're only going to get a product at the very least months from now, sometimes a few months, sometimes many months. The other way that backers differ from your standard customers is that most backers tend to be early adopters, and I'll get into a little bit of what that means. So first, let's talk about the backer journey. So it's really important to consider that your backers are embarking on a journey with you, and this journey is something that's going to last many months, and that provides a really unique opportunity for you to engage with them in ways that are going to have a positive impact on the way that they perceive your product once they get that product in their hands, whenever that happens to be that you ship it. So there's this opportunity side of things, but on the flip side, there's also a demand side of things. Like the fact that these people are on this journey with you for many months, that actually demands that you think about the experience that they're going to have during that period of time. Because that experience is going to color their perception of your product. So if during that time they feel like you're being unresponsive, they feel like you're not providing them with updates, they don't trust that your team is actually moving forward on developing the product in a way that is consistent with their expectations, that is all going to color very negatively on their perception of your product when they get your product. So it's really, really crucial that you take the fact that these backers are on a journey with you into account. The next thing, I was talking about the early adopters. What does that even mean? So this chart here is a chart of the adoption curve that's very commonly known. The adoption curve for new technologies. And even though this model was originally developed to talk about like the adoption of like big technologies, like the adoption of automation in the auto industry. It is really handy as well to think about. It is like a really handy rubric for you to use when you're thinking about the adoption of your product as well. And I do make just one slight tweak to it. I actually, there's two kind of early phases, innovators and early adopters. I think we can just talk about that early phase as your early adopters. And, your Kickstarter backers are essentially your product's early adopters. And what does that mean? I mean, that means that these are people who are willing to try out new and unproven products. These are people who care more deeply about the problem that your problem solves than probably a lot of the customers that you'll have in the future, because they care deeply enough that they are going to be willing to try out something unproven. And they also tend to be people that have a greater level of expertise, in that area that your product inhabits. And lastly, these people are often more forgiving about, changes to your product. So if your product changes a little bit from what it was on your project page, they're more forgiving than your customers would be. Though again, I want to be clear, more forgiving doesn't mean that you can do a lot of changes. Like they're forgiving as long as your product still lives up to its larger core promise. And there's the other aspect of early adopters also is that they can also provide feedback and input to your product in a way that your standard customers won't. And lastly, if you can convert them to advocates, they can be really great supporters to get the word out about your product. And in part because, as I mentioned earlier, these are people who tend to have a higher level of expertise and passion for products in the space that your product inhabits. So that means also these are people that often tend to have more clout or influence, and are able to their perspective to have a higher level of influence within their communities if they are touting your product to members of their community. All right, so I think that kind of gave a good, I think, lens for why backers matter so much. That took me a little bit longer than I hoped, but I want to now welcome the panel. I'm just going to bring them in here and introduce you to each of them. So first off, I'm bringing here Erik. We have Lynnette and Ted as well. So great. I know I briefly mentioned the three names. What I'll do now is I'm just going to give each of them an opportunity to provide, a short overview of who they are and a little bit about their company as well. So Erik, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Yeah. Hi. I'm Erik, a Swedish mechanical engineer with I really love creativity. So that's, you can kind of see a little bit in the back here. And in the engineering field, that was a bit lacking, especially in prototyping. So from my point of view, I just wanted to spread that, and that's how I founded my company Strawbees through running a Kickstarter back in early 2014. So we met I started the project in 2013. Yeah, so that's the short one, and now we're in the business of sharing, letting people build big stuff in a really fast pace, which actually works both in school and at home. So yeah, that's the thing I wanted to share my.
Thanks, Erik. Let's move now to Lynnette. If you want to give a quick intro. Oh wait, Lynnette, I think you're muted.
I'm better now. I don't know how that happened. All right. I'm Lynnette Kelley. I am a co-owner of Calamity Worldwide, and we run the website calamityware.com. So we sell products that are based on the drawings of Don Moyer. And the majority of our products are traditional looking blue willow dinnerware, but with added calamities like a Sasquatch and pterodactyls and zombie poodles. So we also sell other beautiful, useful, and funny products like silk scarves and t-shirts and letterpress prints, puzzles, kitchen textiles, variety of other unique gifts, but they're all based on Don's silly illustrations. So we actually just completed our 50th successful Kickstarter project, and we are currently running a project for a lovely cotton throw blanket.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome. Ted, let's go over to you.
Totally. Hello, everybody. Lynnette, that's really funny because I just adopted a zombie poodle during the apocalypse. So pretty cool. I'm going to have to get matching stuff.
For sure.
No dogs around here yet. But yeah, so I'm Ted Burdett, one of the founders of Strand Design. It's actually the studio that my wife and I maintain together. It's our little creative playground, and through Strand Design, we've done a whole bunch of different stuff, starting with furniture design, actually bags and things that we've put into distribution in different ways. And like Julio said a while back, we started tinkering pretty hardcore with food making, and since then, that's pretty much what we mess around with. So that's spurred this brand 4No, which is focused on sourdough bread making, home bread baking a few years ago. And it's really interesting to see how that's entered the zeitgeist or transformed over some years. And I also teach industrial design and entrepreneurship at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So I've got a degree and background in industrial design and a master's degree in business. But I'm maybe the most un-MBA MBA that I know. So that's me.
Awesome. And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of clanging here. This is New York radiators. It should go away in a minute, but I'm going to dive right in. So what I want to start in is really exploring why backer satisfaction matters. I touch on some of that in a broad sense in my slides, but I love to hear from your personal experience. Why is backer engagement important? What is the impact that you see it having on your business? It doesn't have to be like specific percents, but just it could be an anecdote. But if you wouldn't mind, I think this is one that I like to go around to all of you to just hear a little bit about in your world. So Lynnette, I think since you have the most projects launched here, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think that backers engagement and satisfaction is just it's important because it's like that thing where you tell one friend and they tell two friends and so on and so on and so on. And that's what happens. So I would say, like with our Kickstarter project, since we've done so many at this point, I bet that returning Kickstarter supporters, I bet that number is 80% for every project that we run. Like, it's a lot. We have a lot of people that just keep coming back. And I think they keep coming back because they like who we are. They like what we stand for. They like how Don talks. I mean, he's just a funny guy. And so that engagement with them, I think, really helps to continue to bring them back. And over on our website at calamityware.com, our returning customer rate is about 30%, which I think is also really good. So I don't think that happens by chance.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You guys have definitely built, I think, a very unique and connection with your customer. I mean, me being as one of your backers, I feel that personally. But Erik, I'd love to hear from your experience, with Strawbees. I know you do a lot of work to engage your community through education materials, videos, and so forth. But like, how do you think about the importance of your backers, but also your community at large?
Well, it started with it's part that they help us move forward, but most of all, it builds trust. I mean, that's something we actually didn't talk that much about when we had the pre-meeting, but it builds a lot of trust because we work with something in education. When they asked us questions, when we kept updating, and we were very agile in that in the early phase, and that just continued growing us. Like, that's the thing. So it was for us to actually build trust outwards. If they just spread the word around us. We wanted to keep it personal, so that's why it was me building things, and it was very, very. That's how it started, spreading some of this, scaling some of that playtime that we had at maker fairs, traveling around, and that's the start of our little community. And then getting some of that experience and getting into our. It's not even an office. That was a weird garage. There were so many weird places they got to visit, but that built trust. So I think from my point of view, that's the focus on actually that backer engagement and satisfaction. But obviously that also inspired them to spread the word. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think both Erik, you and Lynnette, both of your teams. Like I think Lynnette, you have, of course, as you were mentioning, Don, who has this really quirky personality and is really funny, and he's kind of like the face of the brand, And I think Erik, for Strawbees, you're the face of the brand. You have your kind of mad scientist vibe, and the really fun videos that you make. And I think Ted, I think you guys also have a human face to your creations. That seems to be a thread I see in terms of like making that connection. But I'd like to, like, for you at Strand, like, how do you guys think about the importance of backers? Because I know when in our conversation you talked about the importance of backers in a different dimension than just repeat business. You talked about it from the standpoint of product development. So would you mind sharing a little bit there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I totally agree with where Lynnette and Erik are the points that they've made as well. I've found those to be the case. But yeah, as someone who is engaged in design, prototyping, developing these products from the ground up, like everybody on this panel. You get familiar with this sense that like the design is never really done. I mean, we pause the process and we say, okay, it's like done enough. It's like done here, and we're going to do something. And we're going to do something with it. But if you're like steeped in that way of iterative thinking, that there's always something going on. That's gonna happen. Some context is going to change, or some idea is going to happen, or some collaboration is going to happen. That's going to make a new version of the thing that you're doing, or something like that. So approaching crowdfunding from that point of view and forgetting about the money that's being raised for a second, the kind of feedback that you can get on what you've designed and taking it to another place at some point is kind of insane. Because like you said, the innovators, early adopters, the people who are coming and backing you on Kickstarter are probably more deeply aware of the gap that you're addressing or the need that you're addressing, the subject matter in which you're working. And so the feedback that they're able to give you on this thing that you're putting out into the world is insanely valuable from a development and design point of view. And the caveat there is like, we don't put totally half-baked ideas out on Kickstarter. They're quite well baked, but I'm talking about like a larger philosophy that like nothing is ever done. Everything that we do is only just, you know, a pausing for a moment in time.
And Ted, I think to that point, I mean, I do think, and I remember this, I think in our conversation a little bit, is the notion also of like the first time you produce something, you know, even if the design itself doesn't change, chances are there will be things related to how you produced it or like processes that might be optimized still, you know, like then that first time, because it is the first time that you're trying to produce that at scale. And you're always going to learn how to do it better. You know, you're always going to encounter some kinks, and some of those kinks might be so substantial that you need to reproduce it. Other times it's a kink that it's small enough that you're still sending it to customers, but you know that that's something you need to work on or that you want to work on for the next iteration of that product. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and like here's one other thing that we didn't talk about before, but that just popped into my mind as everyone was giving their answers. One of the classes I teach at UIC is entrepreneurial product development, EPD. And the students, usually like 15 to 20 students in that class each year, will launch a Kickstarter campaign as a part of this whole process. And it's just kind of like one of the really special things about the backer relationship and why it feels to me like it should be common sense that it is nurtured and highly valued, is that like it can be your first entrepreneurial experience. And it's not just we're not just talking about like the reputation that you build with someone, but we're also talking about your development of your own image of, you know, yourself as an entrepreneur. And I love to see the way that a strong, considerate engagement with backers, in the case of my students, can majorly build their confidence going forward as creators. So, you know, it almost becomes like a family and friends kind of a relationship, which is so cool.
You know, it's so interesting here you say that. I'm going to just move on to the next point in a second, but the one comment, just even thinking about our own experience building Launch Studio, just like the importance of relationships with your customers, you know, the importance of those interactions and understanding what matters to them, what excites them, you know, and having that, being able to have that dialogue, is just so valuable to help you, you know, continue to create a product that both like excites you, but also, you know, excites your audience. So now let's move into a little bit about like, what does it take to keep your Kickstarter backer satisfied? You know, I think we've made, I think, a strong case for why it's so important. And I think there's a few different areas that I want to touch on. And I think one area where I want to start to touch on is, you know, people think about backer satisfaction often in like, oh, I just have to reply to people courteously, which is all really important and we're going to get to. But I want to think even before then, like how do you even start setting yourself up to have satisfied backer before you even launch? You know, and the one thing that comes to mind for me is, of course, appropriately setting backer expectations so that they know how far along you are on the road to manufacturing and to being ready for manufacturing. It means like being really honest about how long it's going to take you to ship. It means you know, portraying what you're doing in a really honest and clear manner. So those are things that come to my mind. I love to hear from each of you, how you think about that. And let's start with you again. Just say, I know we've talked about the specific issue in you know, earlier, so I'd love to hear from you here first.
Is this where you want me to tell my teapot story?
You know what? Let's save that one for managing backers once the campaign has funded. but I'm glad you remember. I do really want to hear.
So I think that one thing that we always make sure that we do when we're starting a project is that we make sure that the prototype is done before we start the project. And I think that that's beneficial because it shortens the duration that the backer has to be waiting for this thing to get finished. So we try to get all that prototyping work out of the way, and we actually have it in hand so that we can actually take pictures of a real thing to be able to start the Kickstarter project with that real thing. And I think that that just helps a lot because we're far enough along that we have a much better, because that prototyping stage, that sometimes can take 6 months without you realizing it's going to take 6 months. You think it's going to be 1 month, and then a month goes by and you don't have it yet. So if I wait until I've got the prototype, I have a much better sense of how long it's going to take to produce that item and how long it's going to take to get it here and ship it. Another thing too is that in the and now I lost my train of thought. Okay, forget it.
No worries. So Ted, let's go to like how do you think about like how do you set yourself up for success before you even launch in terms of backer satisfaction?
Definitely do what Lynnette just said. Get things to the point where you're showing something that is real, where you've actually been able to evaluate the feasibility of producing it and understand the timeline in a good way. I just launched a campaign last fall, right before the pandemic hit. Like it was like, okay, we finished, I think in I want to say November, and then it was like, okay, December is happening, so it's holidays, and then there's going to be Chinese New Year. This was going to be cast in northern China, and then things were going to be like going. The tooling was already made. The prototype was actually done on the production tooling, so I had very, very, very high degree of confidence that it was going to get done. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going into a total side story here, but
that's all right. That's all right.
And then the pandemic happened, so there, boom. But the other things that you can do, I would say, be prepared to lead fun discussions and actually like not only delight people when you deliver the thing, but like along the way. There's a lot that you can do to inspire people and keep the stoke up through getting content ready, and like video content, educational content, appreciation content ready when you make the first campaign, so that like that stuff is all ready to go. Not to say that you shouldn't be doing stuff on the fly and reacting to what people are asking you about and new topics that are coming up as a result of forming a new community, but you can be ready in that way as well.
And I agree with all of this before, but we also we actually, for the first Kickstarter, I had already produced, so for me, the production thing I was very confident with that. And we were doing this complexity analysis, what can happen here? And on the actual Strawbees project, it was very, very deliverable. And we actually delivered, I think it was like a week after the date or something. That was super successful. But we've also done one, and that's a nightmare. So, we had done the same failure analysis before, but we got stuck in certification limbo. So there's always something strange that can happen, but I mean, you can only do so much. And then transparency was the thing. Unfortunately, we were also overworked and we're trying to deliver it. We finally delivered it. That was one of the things that we had to push in a lot of money outside of the money from the Kickstarter to actually just go through that. So you can never go, but that complexity, it's called something. I lost the terminology. We call it something when we go through this role play of all the ways this product can go south. There's a term for it. You probably.
I don't know it. I should study engineering more.
Yeah, but it's pretty recent. We use it. It's our software engineers that came up with that, and we use it for our hardware. So we steal because a lot of hardware designers, we don't go through that stuff. But now I'll post it. Maybe we can send it out after the fact. It's backed by science. It's great. It's a great exercise. So I'd recommend it.
No, that's great. Yeah, and sorry, go on. Were you done? Cool.
I'm done.
I'm gonna move on to the next topic, which then starts getting into, okay, so these are some things that before you even launch that you want to think about, and when you're live, communicating honestly, making sure you're far enough along. But now let's talk about, so your project is funded, and now it gets to that point where you know you now have a backer community. You have these group of people that have actually pledged money to you and are now expecting to receive this product in return, you know, anywhere from 3 to 12 months down the road. You know, like one of the areas that is super important is, of course, keeping your community updated about, you know, what's going on. And so this is where, you know, like I love to hear a little bit from you all, both like the challenges that you face when you're in this phase, and what are ways that you've been able to overcome those challenges.
I'll go first.
Perfect.
So I think that sending updates is super important because you want to keep your backers up to date on what's happening. I think that even if there isn't anything to say, sometimes it's better to just say something, because you don't want your backers to think that you've dropped off the face of the earth. We've had projects that, even though, you know, we did the prototyping ahead of time, like you said, it took a really long time for whatever reason to get the thing produced. It might have been 9 months, which is really long for one of our projects. We try to not let that happen. So during that time, if you don't keep up with those updates, your backers are going to think you've left them and that you've abandoned them. And you don't want that from your backers, because like you said earlier, Julio, they're your bank. You know, they gave you the money to do this. So you owe them that much to give them those updates. But a challenge that I have found with this, I think that, I don't know what's happening, but I think that there's a lot of times that our backers don't get the emails from Kickstarter to alert them that there is an update on the project page. As a creator, that's really frustrating, because we are putting the updates out there, but then you'll get a random email from someone that says, "What's going on?" Well, we updated the project, but they're not getting, the technology is getting in the way of them understanding that there's progress being made. They just don't know it. I don't know how to fix that one, but that is a challenge that we have, you know. So you try to smooth it over and say, "Hey, did you read the update? We posted it on this date." And, you know, always go back to the page if you ever wonder. I try to educate them as best I can when that happens, but that is a challenging thing that comes up.
No, absolutely. And Erik, what about for you guys? Like, how do you, I mean, I know earlier you talked about also like the importance of, you know, just how for you guys, you have this persona that you've created and everything. Were you able to kind of bake that persona into your updates? Like did you use updates to keep people in?
Yeah, and the first one, it was really like, it also, we made that a fun part of it, because the thing is, we were a small project in a way, but we were actually over that time grown. But that made me also have the confidence to be very transparent. So we took photos from the test plant, and we were doing all these things and really sharing, and maybe oversharing in a way, and actually being playful in that, and that kept them really engaged, and it spread the word even further. So we, you know, that's so, but that's the one that I had very high confidence in, you know, so that then you could afford most of that. So I don't know. That was the thing when it started going south. We tried to keep it transparent and like showing the things, and like this, everything works. We're stuck here, and that actually was a big problem for us to figure out what is the narrative, because the narrative here is that I'm stressed out. So I'm actually trying to figure that. We're just sitting here with our hands tied. We can't do anything. Like I could sit here and work all day and send emails, but then it won't. Nothing else happens. It's very, very hard. So, but I think we posted that, and people were actually very, in general, happy because of our pre-story. So having all the previous successful Kickstarter, the previous successful Kickstarters between the teams that we actually worked in for that one that we had trouble with, and actually having a good like help from other employees that were helping out and just keeping in touch all the time. But it was very important to stay personal for us. That.
Yeah, and the one I just wanted to add is like, I think the reality is, I think sometimes when it's hardest to send an update, which is when things are not going the right way, you might not even have the right, like a great update to really give people a sense of how things have changed. Yeah. Like those are sometimes the most important moments that your community needs an update. Like I think sometimes the hardest moment to give an update is when the update is most needed by your backers. And Ted, I know that like most creators, you having run many projects, you've encountered some bumps along the road too in your projects. How have you tackled those moments when it comes to updating your community?
Not always well. I mean, I would say that I agree deeply with the other guests here that this is really important to do. But getting it's very, if you don't know what to say, it's very easy not to write something, and it's very easy to say, I'm going to do that update next week because I'm expecting to get something from the factory at the end of the week. And I don't know, do I want to bog people down with the choice between how we're going to change the tooling this way or change it this way? And then eventually at the end of the week, somebody sends you an angry email and is like, why haven't you told us anything? And you realize it would actually be better to just say, hey, we're looking at this option and this option, hope to send you something next week, and then put it in your calendar and send something next week, even if you don't have the answer. Yeah, I mean, and I have learned that the hard way, probably like by struggling with it and not doing it, but more information is better than no information or silence.
I think most creators I talk to have learned that the hard way. I'm hoping that some of the people who listen to this webinar today won't have to learn that the hard way, but chances are some of them will have to. Like I think just we're as humans better at learning things the hard way than the easy way.
Sometimes you remember better, yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's really good to force yourself to do these updates. Actually, after we had a period that we were not so good, so you can't always be on your top of your game. But then we went back into a really good game, actually just sharing like what we were doing with it, so you can still keep the excitement for the product, which worked. It was just getting past this hurdle of unknown things when we were going global with something with radio controlling. It was against my better judgment, but I did it anyway. But then, so take that with you, just cross that and make sure to keep that updated. And like, yeah.
And so let's move on now to I think the other part, of course, one thing is we're talking now about proactive updating people. I think the other part is really how do you engage with your backers? I think it's I always talk about respectful interactions, but I think it's easier, of course, to engage with your backers who are asking very politely things or who are giving you, a nice little just positive comment. But it can, interacting with backers also involves dealing with sometimes negative feedback, abusive comments, abusive interactions, and just kind of diffusing difficult challenges. And Lynnette, I think this is actually the perfect place for you to tell your story. I think about how because that just gets to the heart of how interactions with customers, your direct interactions with them, can be so powerful and can have such long-lasting effect. So why don't we start there, and then we'll kind of explore this topic a little more fully.
Yep. All right. I'll try to keep it as short as I can. So several years ago, we were running a Kickstarter project for a teapot and a creamer and sugar. And this was the project that, like I had said, it took a long time in production. It was probably at least 9 months. And so by the time they were ready to ship out to our customer or to the backers, we were so excited. So they arrived at the fulfillment center and I had one shipped to me, and I gave the fulfillment center the okay to start shipping all of the rewards. And a couple days later, I received mine and my heart sank because I realized it was not packed properly. My teapot was just like shaking around in the box. It was not secured in the box. Thank goodness mine didn't break, but I knew that if mine didn't break, well, somebody's was going to break. Like we had shipped out over 1,000 at that point. And so surely someone was going to receive some broken teapots. And so at that point in time, I did at least address it with the fulfillment center. I asked them to unpack all the other ones, repack them correctly. And then we talked to the factory, made sure that any next runs of the product were going to be packed correctly. But in the meantime, a customer backer had received her teapot and she wrote to me, and I quote, she said, "Did you really ship my porcelain teapot with no packaging whatsoever to wrap them?" "Yes, after all this time you did. Would you like to send me another one carefully wrapped, or would you like to refund my money? So she was pretty snarky. She was pretty mad. But I was also mad because I was mad at myself for not being more patient in delivering. So when I wrote her back, this was like a critical moment because I'm either going to win her over or I'm going to make her more mad. So I acknowledged her anger and I told her, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for being mad at us. But then I went on to say, like, let me tell you what happened. I'm mad too. First of all, we're always going to replace a broken item that arrives, through shipping. And with Kickstarter, you always have to remember something is bound to go wrong. It's a time for us as the creator to be taking the time to test the product and test what's going on. So we realized something was wrong. We tried to remedy it. But, we're just as frustrated as you are. And imagine, put yourself in my shoes. I've now got 1,000 people who I'm disappointing. So I'm feeling the weight of that. I do feel it. And I admitted, that I wasn't patient in shipping out and told her what we're doing to fix it and that we learned this valuable lesson. But I left it as, I understand if you've lost your faith in us. So I tried to, just be as humble as I could. And when she wrote me back, it was so wonderful because she wrote me back. I clearly won her over. She apologized for her snarky email and she blamed it on her evil twin, which was perfect at the time because we actually sold a puzzle that was called Evil Twins. So without her knowing, I sent her a puzzle. In the meantime, after she got it, she was grateful. She sent me a little thing that she had made with the broken teapot lid, which I thought was hysterical. And then we just kind of became pen pals after that. And we've kept in touch throughout, like, since then. She still buys from us from the website and we're buddies. I checked on her at the beginning of the pandemic. I checked on her halfway through, just make sure you're okay. And so it's been nice. I forged a relationship with this person, which, it's just important to be honest and upfront and people will understand that. So that was a good experience.
Yeah, and I think what I really love about this example is, of course, not all of your interactions with customers that start negatively will end up like this, but it underlines the fact that, these are human interactions. You're talking with another human being, and that, at the end of the day, it really, the way that you handle a bad situation can transform that bad situation into an opportunity to build a relationship and to, create a loyal customer or a loyal advocate, in a way that might have never happened if that situation had happened to begin with. I think if she had gotten a beautiful teapot that had never broken, she probably would not be as loyal of a customer of Calamity Worldwide as if this has happened. So I think this is, of course, I don't want to make it seem like this is like the thing that will happen every time you have a negative a customer writing you about a negative situation, but it just shows you the opportunity that you can that can actually be afforded to you when you handle these situations with care, with listening to them, and with a commitment also. Because I think one of the things that you did is not just the human side of things, but you had a real commitment to solve her issue. So you had the human touch coupled with like a true commitment for that. And so yeah, so I mean, I would love to also, Ted, from your perspective, like what are the ways, what are some of the ways that you approach handling, I think within the scope of Kickstarter, direct messages and comments are where this of course happens. And I know once you have backers, that communication also happens via email, but like, what are the ways that you kind of approach those direct communication channels?
Yeah, I mean, like, during the campaign, for sure, you wouldn't be on top of comments and on top of direct messages with backers. I've had a similar experience. I mean, like there are certainly some comments and some conversations that I have not been able to resolve, but you always take the high road and like never get into fights or anything like that. I've had an experience too where a lot of the customers that we have for the Forno bread oven, who regularly send us images of what they're baking and talk about how things are going, are people who we have had those kind of those early either early hiccups with or early praise from. Actually, it's just like active, it's just active customers. We have a lot of those conversations now after the fact through email. People will write and say, my sourdough starter isn't working right, or the season has changed and my timing of all of my baking has changed. And we'll have, and we'll continue to have these conversations just about around baking. It goes even on beyond the product itself.
And this is great, because I think this actually dovetails right into the next part of this topic that I wanted to touch on, which is, about products. I mean, I broadly talk about product support, but it's about this like commitment to what the result that the person's trying to get from your product. It's not, I mean, I think some products, I think Calamity Ware, like the Calamity Ware products are more products that you use at home. I think you just get it, you get that use. But I think when you talk about Strawbees and when you talk about Fourneau, for example, they're really about like the value of the Fourneau is like, does it help you bake bread? So like the value of that product is increased by having education content or having, the know-how on how to actually use it, unlike a blanket or a plate, which, I think most people know how to use those things more than well enough. But I think Ted, for you and Erik, for you at Strawbees, you guys had to contend also with like, how do you really help people achieve the outcome that they're trying to achieve using the products that you bring to market? And Ted, you talked a little bit, I think there, like Erik, what about from Strawbees' perspective? How do you guys, focus on that? I'd love to just hear about, like, I know you have a YouTube channel. I'm sure you have direct communications with some of the people in your community too. How does that support happen?
So that's actually one of our biggest, that's more of what we're developing than product now. So, and one of them is like Lower Lift, my YouTube channel, where I can just play, which is actually in a way one of the strongest things, because it shows how fast it is. But that's, once again, comes back to that honesty and transparency we talked about before. But then what we've built, we've engaged a lot of teachers, and the teachers are what spread it. And then we built a platform for them together with them, which is actually not even launched, but we have something called the learning platform now, but the classroom is coming out, which is just like, because we're mostly working in education now. So, but that's been one of the things, but it started with our backers, because I don't know how much that, all those numbers, I think it was mostly teachers who bought it. Teachers and librarians, they just flooded into the Kickstarter, and that's how we started it. I think it was through Maker Faire. It was like this thing, so it built itself, the community, and that's how I think a community can't be forced. Now we come back into community issue, but I mean, that's, I don't know if that even answers your question. This is me, but just like this, yeah, that's
no, but I think it does get to, I mean, because I think this is where, this part of the question is really about how do you continue, supporting your backers. This is where supporting your backers just completely dovetails with supporting your customers. It's the point of like, how do you help the people who have your product get the most value from it? And I think for you, on your side, I think with Strawbees, a lot of it is inspiring people, showing what's possible. And I think for your product, especially, it's also, you do have this complex ecosystem where, a big customer set of your product are teachers. You of course have talking directly to users, people who want to use that product themselves, or to kids, but like a lot of the core users of your community are educators. And so I do think you're getting that, but this is an area where it gets beyond just the Kickstarter. But I think it's super important, especially like when you're talking about backer satisfaction in the long term. Like if somebody got Strawbees because they want to use it to make cool stuff, like the fact that you're able to support them to make cool stuff and to make new things and to understand what's possible is really, really core for them to continue to be excited about their Strawbees, a year, 2 years down the road from when they originally backed your campaign, and I think we are talking here about like, how can you engage those backers and into these kind of long-term relationships that can ultimately also, benefit all parties involved, all stakeholders, benefit Strawbees, benefit the backer who's using the product, so on. So I do think what you were talking was very, very relevant.
It comes in with that. So that's the thing, we look at it. So my background is also in sustainability. So we don't want to push too much product. That's why we figure out how to update it. And that's also the next thing that we're working on. How do we actually have a sustainable business, but built from the Kickstarter that actually had, so all of these things obviously go together. But I mean, for me, it was to just continually evolve it. I don't have a digital through loophole into them, except actually for our robotics. Obviously, we can update that on the back end with firmware stuff, just like every current successful company. So we have a very strange thing. Our construction system is basically the dongle that you need it to experience a lot of our things. And a lot of people thinks it's a one-off thing because obviously it's straw. So we have a huge, like 2 years ago with the plastic straw in the turtle, like Strawbees. That's our biggest customer problematic, actually acquiring new customers, because then nobody wanted to touch drinking straw with a 10-foot pole. And the thing is, we actually were solving the problem with that. We wanted to build value in what is seen as trash. That's how the company started, and then we had this entire thing, and that actually comes once again into this thing that they're way more durable in that sense than what they're designed for to have in a drink. And so that's why you shouldn't have them. You should build really big robots with it.
And so I want us to wrap up. Just one final. Sorry, it's just that I want to make sure to leave a little bit of time for the questions. And the last thing that I just want to touch on is tools and processes. So I just really quickly wanted to go around and just, thinking about those things that we talked about when it comes to, like, everything from engage, supporting your community once they have the product, to actually just, managing direct messages with your backers and so on and so forth. Like, what are the tools that you use? Like, what are the channels that you use to communicate with your community? Are there any, like, help desk tools that any of you are using and that you really love? Are there, any strategies that you've put into practice from all these? So now just kind of getting in the nitty gritty, not in a lot of detail, but I just go give each of you like 2 minutes to be like, hey, these are the channels we use, and this is, if there's any cool tools or processes that you put into place that you can quickly touch on, that would be really great. Ted, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Tried lots of things over the years, as Lynnette pointed out. Sometimes the software gets in the way with communication when you're actually using the platform. I wish I had a really good solution for that. I don't. As soon as we can, though, we get everybody into Shopify and actually fulfill out of Shopify. So I just, that's out of a reaction to sort of the frustrating nature of having some conversations going on social media, some in email, some on the Kickstarter platform itself. Just a desire to consolidate as many things as is possible. So we use that as our CRM, as it were.
Cool, awesome. And Erik, what about you? Do you guys have any kind of tools, things that you've
multiple for different levels? But that's it. Like, for me, I wanted to use simple things. So I didn't want this to appear too big in the beginning, so to speak. But mostly now it's YouTube. I'm unfortunately way worse at Twitter than I should be, for example. But for us, all those tools, we wanted it to be accessible things. So that's what we used in the beginning. But what you touched on here is that way you lose a lot of the communication. So we needed to aggregate it or gather it somewhere. But actually now I'm not the one to answer. But I actually came up with what was called before the tool I wanted to give you for figuring out your projects. But it's just, it's always something that makes you work. It's called the pre-mortem analysis. I just didn't like
pre-mortem.
I don't know if you've
pre-mortem.
Okay.
And it's something we do all the time now on every project. It's a great way. Like, we can just go completely nuts on how badly something can go. And it's actually very good. It's my favorite analysis. So that's the only tool. It's not necessarily a physical, like the tools you're asking for. Now we have
no, but that's great. I think, but that hits on the core thing of, like, backer satisfaction. That is a foundational thing. Like, going into setting yourself up for success at the beginning is super foundational. Like, if you do that wrong, like, all the other things might not be able to save you. So I think that is super foundational. So I do think that's super valuable. And then Lynnette, what about you? What are some of the tools that you use?
Yeah, I think two main things that we use. One is Klaviyo for email correspondence. And the reason that helps us a lot with our Kickstarter projects is that because we've done so many, we've got 50 projects worth of backer information. And if I wanted to tell all of those backers of those 50 projects about something new that Dawn has done, I don't want to go to 50 projects and send out an update. So we're able to use Klaviyo to just send one email, not 50 emails, because we have multiple backers over those projects, one email to everybody that has ever backed a project to tell them about something that's going on in the Calamity world. So that's very helpful. The other one is one that you actually turned me on to, which I will be forever grateful for, and that is Help Scout. So we use Help Scout as a tool to manage our incoming customer service emails specifically for our website. But anytime we post updates on Kickstarter, we also will tell people, respond to robot@calamityware.com, because that's where you're going to get the most help. And so Help Scout helps us kind of manage who, there's only 3 of us answering these emails. But we can assign this type of email goes to that person, and this one I'll answer, and this one Jack will answer. And it's just an easy way to keep track. And it's been a wonderful tool that I could not live without now.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Now, what I want to do, I'm going to turn it over and let's look for some questions from our audience. I see that we have a few questions that have been posted. There was one early on in the comments, so I'm going to look at that one. I think that was the first one posted, and then we'll look at the ones in the Q&A session. So I'm just going to read these. So first, I think the first question here on the chat was directed to me, but I would love to hear also the perspective of our panelists. So it's, from your experience, what's the longest a consumer should wait for their product? And, I think this really varies. Of course, people, I don't think I will be willing to wait many years for their products. And at that point, if you need many years, you're probably too early to run a Kickstarter campaign. You probably haven't taken your product far enough. As we were talking earlier, how it's really important to have a really, really clear sense of what it's going to take to produce your product before you launch. If you want to have any real chance of keeping your community happy and building delivering not even a delightful experience, a okay experience, I think that's required. So I would say, in general, if you're at that point, it's probably won't take you longer than, a year or so to deliver a product. So a year is really, I think, on the long end of things, but and I think it's now most campaigns probably take somewhere between 4 to 8 months for delivery. I don't have the data, but I would suspect that the actual delivery is probably somewhere between 6 to 14 months is probably the actual window that most campaigns take. I no longer work at Kickstarter, so I no longer have access to that data. That's just me kind of guesstimating there. I don't know if for all of our panelists, what do you have a window that you shoot for, or that you try really not to go outside of when it comes to window for delivery of your product? Yeah, and I'll just throw that out there. Any of you can jump in. I'm not going to go through and ask each one of you.
I think for us, I would say it's 3 to 6 months. If it's beyond 6 months, it makes me nervous. I just feel bad. I feel guilty that our backers don't have their reward yet. So for me, we always try to do it so that we can be delivering within 3 to 6 months. If it reaches 9 months, that really hurts. And I pray to God we never get to the point that it's a year. That would be bad.
Cool.
Yeah, I can second that. Sorry, Erik. I would say 3 is really nice, and I think that we with this last one where we had crazy delays and then shipping got all crazy at the end of the summer and the beginning of the fall. I think we were close to a year, and it was terribly painful. So don't do that to yourself. Definitely don't do that to yourself. But do what Erik said. Do the pre-mortem. Don't do it at 3 a.m. while you can't sleep. Do it in a meeting.
And the thing is that pre-mortem, that's one of the few. It's such a concise thing to bring in some experts that you don't have internally. That's one of the things. Because experts don't have that much time, and you can't just go. This is the perfect opportunity to just get them in there. If they know about the production method you're going to use, if it's injection molding or are you going to use soldering, and everybody knows, that's the like you can let them go in for 1 or 2 hours. It's the best data source we've had. It's but I don't know. I would like, because now when we work with like massive productions, 3 to 6 months that's around where it is. And like even if I have everything known, I even have tools now. Unfortunately, sometimes it's so slow when we use the big logistics chain. So now I get happy going back to. I'd like to keep it for 3 to 6, but we actually have one that went 12 months and then a little bit extra, and that hurt. That hurt really bad. So.
And I think the one thing the complexity of your product also matters here. You know, if you're doing a product that requires multiple processes, electronics, software development, and so on and so forth, one, you're probably going to take a little bit longer to deliver, and two, your risks of delay are much longer too. Like, you know, like your potential for delays can be, as we've seen before on Kickstarter, you know, delayed for a year, you know, so meaning that you might get it only almost 2 years after the campaign. So I do want to be, you know, very like the complexity of your manufacturing will also impact both how long you're probably going to guess that it will take, or you're going to not guess. You shouldn't guess that you're going to you know, plan for it to take based on your research and your understanding. But you know, the risks of expansion, because all those different processes become different points of failure, and the assemblies of bringing those together becomes different points of failure. So you just have more points of failure that could you know, lead to issues. All right, let's jumping into the next question here. We have, how do you manage a bad message from a backer during a campaign which is visible to everyone? How do you reply politely without annoying your backers? Any examples that you lived through during your own campaigns? So who wants to take that one?
I can think of one. There is a backer who has really taken issue with the fact that our campaigns have not been fully EU friendly. And I would love to make our campaigns fully EU friendly, but for the products in question, it's a 30-pound package at a sort of like medium box size. And the thing is, like, it's logistically impossible to make it in the US or do quality control in the US or assembly in the US after global manufacturing, and then do individual shipments to Europe while building in VAT and duties up front. And so like few days into a previous campaign, this particular backer raised this issue, and you know, with strong language, and sort of like, you've done this before, I'm really offended, and you're like really being US centric, and that's not cool. And these things really, you know, like give you some anxiety when they come in. You really want a solution to it, but you maybe don't have one. I mean, we've gone so far as to change all of the rewards in a campaign, like toward the end, to shift everybody into EU or Australian backer pods so that we could bulk ship and actually do it through importers and have everybody's VAT and duties included. So we've gone to great lengths to try to solve it, but unless you know what the demand is or who's going to back, it's like a logistical circus. So I actually just like tried to explain all of that stuff. Like, if you have a hard question that comes in and you understand it, I would say try to educate if possible, and be nice. And if you are having a hard time being nice when writing an email, it just means that you need to go for a walk and get a massage and then write the email the next day.
And have any of you had to deal with just pure trolling comments? Because I know that's something that happens sometimes. I mean, I think this is a person who is clearly, you know, giving you a hard time in an unfair way about something that though they honestly cared about. But have you had those situations where it's just somebody, maybe a competitor, trolling on your comments, or just somebody who was probably not being authentic, they were just trying to give you a hard time? Have any of you had to deal with this?
I really can't remember, but it's another tangent that comes in, like when we talked about this, when they're very vocal. Like one of the big things with that gathers a storm in a way. You have a comment somewhere earlier then we always, like the big ones, we addressed in that flow, but we also put it in the update because that's something we might need to address for everyone. Because
Got it.
But then the trolling, I don't really remember if there was something, but when something has lower significance, because if what you invest in the early stage backer engagement, you kind of get back there. So we had people defending us because we were doing it good enough, and they were actually starting in the comments before we could, because we're in Sweden, so we could off in the time zone, so we're not answering. They know that, and then our backers answer, which was great. So that's another thing. But that's when they believe in the project, and when you've done your legwork, which we did, like traveling, so they knew in the beginning that there's some pro backers, so to say. Like in a way, we don't. These aren't purchased pro backers. These are people who really believe in you, somehow met you or spread the word, come tied to the project. I think that pays itself back. It's not that wasn't an idea or a plan. It just happened, and I love that.
No, that's great.
We experience that too. I mean, we have a lot of backers and even just customers that come to our defense when somebody is, dissing us, whether it's on social media or wherever. We can kind of sit back and wait because typically someone else will defend our honor, which is lovely.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's I think the ideal place that you'd want to get to. So we have 2 more questions here. I know we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly try to run through these last 2. How did you decide your policy on returns warranties, especially in the early days before you had money and cushion in the bank? So does anybody want to take that one?
I mean, I think early on, we took something that we thought was kind of standard and said like 30-day, and we just did something. And I don't know if it was right or not. I mean, just like 3 weeks ago, I woke up in the morning, had my coffee, and started madly typing on risks and rewards section for a new campaign, like new policy. I'm going to make this very clear from the beginning. Your money has been spent. There's no refund. That said, I mean, I've gotten emails from people who it's time for payment collection, and they're like, you know what, I just lost my job, and I know that refunds on Kickstarter are not a thing. They're like, to me, it's not a huge deal because there aren't a ton of them. And when somebody says that they're in a tough spot, I give them the benefit of the doubt, and we just do that. This does bring up one other thing, though, is like, what if a campaign goes really, really, really bad, and you are facing like the 12-month or the 14-month or the 2-year sort of thing? Giving people their money back is always an option. And I think that it doesn't need to be like baked into your policy, but if you're going to run a campaign and maybe it's a complex product or it's a little bit risky in terms of like how far you've gotten out of supply chain stability, just like have a moment to think about that as a possibility, that you can always give people their stuff back, and you can always like run another campaign. And that's in a lot of cases a very, very honorable thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, I mean, to your point though, Ted, I do think it's one of those things where if you are able to refund backers, usually it's a small number of backers, you're saying, it's a good thing to do. I mean, it's you want people who are in your community to want to be part of your community. When you don't refund backers who really want to refund, what also ends up happening sometimes, which I think none of you have had this situation, but I've seen this situation in other campaigns where those backers that were not refunded are in the comments creating kind of this really negative vibe, because they're very frustrated that they can't get their money refunded. So then they start trying to poison the comments and start to drum up all this negativity. And as we all know, it's possible for somebody to start drumming that up and create kind of create this kind of negative momentum, especially if it's if the campaign is going through a hard moment where there are delays and things like that. Like if you have 1 or 2 people that are trying to lead the charge of like to build this negativity, it can actually snowball into something that just becomes much more difficult for you to deal with. So I know it can be really tough as a small independent creator or startup that has very little money to have to give a refund. And there are some moments where you really can't, but if there's any possibility that you can, if a backer really does seem like he doesn't want to be part of that community, doesn't want the product anymore, it's always like, if it's possible, do it. The other thing that I see creators doing sometimes is like they, will, like, if at a certain point you're gonna have to pay the factory, and after that you really can't give a refund, they actively communicate that, like, hey, next month we're paying the factory. I know it's like a lot of people don't want to talk about, you don't want to, like, hey, this is your last chance to ask for a refund, but like I've seen that done before, where it's like where a creator openly mentioning some milestones that are going to have some lock-in effects. But yeah, it is a really tough thing. And if you really are not going to be able to offer any refunds, you should just be also, it's not something you have to do. Kickstarter rules don't expect you to do that. I would just be very open and clear about that as well. Just really, tell it as in your story that, like, hey, you're an independent creator doing this, you don't have other capital. So, backers, when they back the project, their support is locked in, from that moment. And that does mean you might lose some backers, but I think it's important. You want to get the backers who know what they're getting into. You don't want to get somebody to back your project who might later have an expectation that that's possible. So, all right, last question. In your opinion, which things should you avoid 100% to keep your backers? Should you avoid 100% to avoid making your backers unhappy? And it asks also about how to manage custom charges to your backers. Let's just take the first one of these, and then I think we're going to be out of time. So does anyone is there one thing that you're like, this is the one thing you should absolutely not do that will piss people off? I know that's a little bit of a hard one.
But I've seen it in other projects, but selling your product somewhere else before you've shipped it. That's
actually a very big one.
Yeah, to your backers, and it should be a given. It should be a given, but I've seen it happen just because delays and stuff. So it just makes sure. But I know sometimes that it has, like, it's happened to me in some projects where I also backed lots of stuff. But that's the only thing I would really avoid. Like, yeah.
Well, I think with that, I think we can just wrap up. I know it's we're no. Actually, that was a great answer, Erik. I just wrapping up because I promised that we would wrap up the panel by 1:25, and it's 1:26. So I've already missed my commitment. But I just wanted to really thank all of our panelists. For everyone, the attendees, if you want to hang out a little bit, I was gonna ask actually for input from our attendees for some of our future events and just announce some of our future upcoming events. But Lynnette, Ted, and Erik, thank you, all three of you, so much for your presence here today and for being willing to share, your experience, share your wisdom with everyone here. So, a round of applause to you for me. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, of course. I'm gonna now shift gears to sorry, 1 second. Shift gears to just and just really quickly, I just want to tell everyone. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, when we started this session, this event is part of the Creators and Launch Studio event series. And this event series is an event series where we bring together creators to explore a topic, or sometimes we'll be bringing creators to explore a single topic in greater depth. But what we really want to make sure these events are sharing things that you care about. So we wanted to ask all of our attendees to really share with us, what do you want to hear about and who do you want to hear it from? So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time waiting for you to provide that information to me right now, what I would ask is, drop me an email at julio@launchstudio.com and let me know, what are the topics that would most interest you in terms of helping you get ready to launch your product on Kickstarter. And are there specific creators that you've looked up to, that you think have done a product that is interesting, maybe in the same category as your own, that you'd love to hear from? I don't know if we'll be able to get that creator that you ask, but it's something that we'll definitely do our utmost to get creators that people are most interested hearing from. So, and then the one last thing, just to quickly announce, on Thursday, May 13th, is going to be our next Creator and Launch Studio event. It's actually going to be a one-on-one conversation with Peak Design, with the team at Peak Design, and with me here at Launch Studio. We're going to have Peter Daring, which is the founder of Peak Design, joining us for that conversation. And one other announcement, we also have, we're going to launch an Experts in Launch Studio webinar series as well. And the first event is going to be with a team from Jellup Advertising. So the date for that hasn't been set yet. It will likely be towards the end of April. So just putting it on your radar that we have some of these upcoming events. If you haven't already, I think everyone here, most of the people here, are either our students or have already signed up for our free preview of the course. If you haven't already, go to launchstudio.com, where you can sign up for a free preview of the Kickstarter Masterclass that was created by Launch Studio. And that is pretty much it. I think with that, I will say goodbye to everyone. Thank you so much for attending and for staying with us. We will send out an email in the next 24 hours with a link to the replay of this webinar, so that you can refer back to it in the future if you so desire. All right, we hope to see you at the next one.